December 1911. The Mediterranean glittered like scattered diamonds under the winter sun as the SS Delhi cut through the waves toward Egypt. On board, a royal family sought warmth and healing. Princess Louise, the Princess Royal and Duchess of Fife, travelling with her husband and 2 daughters for their annual winter retreat along the Nile. But clutched in her hands was something far more precious than the promise of Egyptian sunshine. A leather jewel case, never far from her side, containing the glittering treasures that defined her status as Queen Victoria's granddaughter. Wedding gifts of extraordinary beauty, diamonds that had danced at royal balls, pearls that had graced the necks of empresses. She had no way of knowing that within hours those jewels would be claimed by the sea forever, and that her desperate attempt to save them would become one of the most heartbreaking jewelry losses in royal history. This is the story of a princess who survived disaster but lost her treasures to the depths. A tale of courage, sacrifice, and the cruel irony that sometimes our greatest efforts to protect what we love most lead to its destruction. A princess born for grandeur. To understand the magnitude of what was lost that December night, we must first understand who Princess Louise truly was. Born in 1867, she was the eldest daughter of the future King Edward VII and Queen Alexandra, a princess destined for greatness from her very first breath. Her wedding in 1889 to Alexander Duff, the Duke of Fife, had been nothing short of spectacular. The newspapers called it a waterfall of sparkling presents, and they weren't exaggerating. The gifts that poured in from across Europe created a treasure trove that would make even modern billionaires weep with envy. From her parents came a magnificent diamond-fringed tiara, its delicate strands catching light like captured starlight. Her new husband presented her with what would become known as the Fife Tiara, a breathtaking creation featuring hundreds of diamonds, including rare pear-shaped stones that trembled with every movement, creating a constant, mesmerizing sparkle. But perhaps the most touching gift came from 112 young ladies who were acquaintances of the bride. Together, they presented Louise with a flexible diamond bracelet described as a band of large diamonds, as flexible as silk. Can you imagine the collective love and admiration that went into such a gesture? The Sassoon family gifted her an exquisite diamond spray of forget-me-nots and leaves. Lady Scott presented a magnificent diamond arrow 6 inches long, designed as a headdress adornment. Lord and Lady Londonderry gave her a diamond lizard with emerald vertebrae, a piece so unique it could have come from a fairy tale. Each gift told a story. Each jewel carried the hopes and blessings of those who loved her. And in December 1911, many of these irreplaceable treasures were nestled safely in that leather case she refused to let out of her sight. The journey that changed everything. The SS Delhi was more than just a ship. She was a floating palace, a symbol of Edwardian confidence and technological triumph. At 470 feet long and accommodating 163 first-class passengers, she represented the pinnacle of luxury travel. Her public rooms were designed by celebrated architects, creating what were known as floating palaces with beautiful drawing rooms, lounges, and fine smoking rooms. For Princess Louise and her family, this journey to Egypt wasn't just a holiday, it was a necessity. Her husband, the 62-year-old Duke of Fife, was in delicate health, and the warm Egyptian climate promised relief from Britain's harsh winter. Their 2 daughters, 20-year-old Princess Alexandra and 18-year-old Princess Maud, accompanied them on what should have been a peaceful family retreat. The timing seemed auspicious. Louise's brother, King George V, was simultaneously being celebrated at the Grand Delhi Durbar in India. The ship's very name, Delhi, felt like a good omen, connecting their private journey to the public triumph of the monarchy. As befitted their royal status, the family travelled with considerable luggage and, of course, Princess Louise's precious jewel case. These weren't just accessories to her, They were tangible links to her heritage, symbols of her position, and deeply personal mementos of love and celebration. But fate, as we know, had other plans. When the sea became the enemy. In the early hours of December 13, 1911, at approximately 1 a.m., the unthinkable happened. Dense fog had descended like a suffocating blanket over the Moroccan coast. Violent westerly winds whipped the sea into a fury. And then, impact. The SS Delhi ran aground on the treacherous rocks near Cape Spartel, a location that ancient mariners had grimly nicknamed the Cemetery of Ships. The irony was devastating. This modern marvel of engineering had fallen victim to the same forces that had claimed vessels for centuries. Passengers were jolted awake by the grinding crash of metal against stone. In the darkness and pouring rain, the urgent call rang out. All on deck. Still in their nightclothes, hastily covered by coats, everyone mustered in the saloons. Lifebelts were distributed as water flooded the lower decks and massive waves crashed over the ship's sides. The wireless distress calls went out immediately. 3 warships responded. The French cruiser Friant arrived first, followed by the British warships HMS London and HMS Duke of Edinburgh from Gibraltar. But the raging storm made rescue attempts extraordinarily dangerous. In a heartbreaking display of heroism, French sailors launched small boats to evacuate women and children. But the sea showed no mercy. An enormous wave capsized one of the rescue launches, hurling its occupants into the freezing water. 3 brave French sailors drowned in their valiant attempt to save lives, a sacrifice that would be formally acknowledged by both the British and French governments. The princess's impossible choice. Throughout this chaos, Princess Louise faced an agonizing decision. The royal family, true to their code of honor, refused to leave the foundering ship until all other women and children had been evacuated. For 9 terror-filled hours, they waited as the storm raged around them. But Louise had another burden, her jewel case. Fellow passengers offered to carry it for her, understanding the precious cargo it contained. But she refused. These weren't just valuable objects. They were her heritage, her history, her most treasured possessions. She would protect them herself. Finally, around mid-morning on December 13th, Admiral Cradock himself took charge of a lifeboat from HMS Duke of Edinburgh to evacuate the royal family. Donning heavy greatcoats over their pyjamas and cinching on life jackets, the Duke, Princess Louise and their daughters climbed into the launch. Louise clutched her jewel case tightly, refusing all suggestions that someone else should hold it. This decision, born of love, protectiveness, and an understandable desire to safeguard her most precious possessions, would prove to be tragically ironic. The moment everything changed. The lifeboat pushed off from the Delhi, battling towering waves that seemed determined to claim more victims. The men aboard frantically bailed water to keep the small craft afloat. They were only yards from the beach. Safety was within reach. And then disaster struck again. An avalanche of surf crashed down without warning, swamping the launch and overturning it completely. All aboard, the princesses, their parents, and the sailors were thrown into the freezing, churning sea. For a terrifying moment, Princess Alexandra disappeared completely under the waves, pulled down by the weight of her drenched clothing. "This is death," I thought, she would later recall. A quick-thinking sailor dove after her, grasping her by the shoulders and hauling her to safety. In the chaos of that capsizing boat, as bodies tumbled through the icy water and waves crashed over struggling survivors, Princess Louise's jewel case was ripped from her desperate grasp. The force of the massive wave that overturned their boat was simply too powerful to resist. In an instant, less than a heartbeat, centuries of royal heritage vanished beneath the waves. The flexible diamond bracelet from 112 young ladies. The forget-me-not spray from the Sassoons. the diamond lizard with emerald vertebrae, the magnificent arrow brooch. All of it gone. The princess could only watch in dismay as her treasures disappeared into the foaming Atlantic, swallowed by the very sea she had just escaped. The cruel irony of love. As the survivors staggered ashore, soaking wet and barefoot in the storm, the full magnitude of the loss became clear. Princess Louise's desperate attempt to protect her jewels had sealed their fate. Had she left them aboard the Delhi, they might have been recovered by the salvage crews, who later managed to retrieve most of the ship's valuable cargo, including nearly £300,000 in gold and silver bullion. Contemporary newspapers didn't hesitate to point out this bitter irony. It is said that if the Princess Royal had accepted the advice of those on the Delhi, she would not have lost her jewels, one correspondent wrote pointedly. An effort was made to induce her to leave them on board, but she insisted on taking them with her in the boat. As they have been buried in moving sands, they are unlikely to be recovered. The very precautions Louise took to guard her jewels led to their destruction. Love became loss. Protection became abandonment. The turbulent waters at Cape Spartel, where Atlantic currents meet the Mediterranean, quickly buried the case in shifting sands and wedged it between rocks, making recovery virtually impossible. What lies beneath the waves? The exact contents of that lost jewel case remain one of history's most tantalizing mysteries. We know that some of Louise's grandest pieces, including the famous Fife Tiara, were not aboard, suggesting she had wisely left her largest treasures in Britain or stored them elsewhere on the ship. But the jewels that were lost were likely far more precious than their material value suggested. These would have been her traveling companions, favorite necklaces, beloved brooches, earrings with personal significance. Perhaps pieces given to her by her late grandmother, Queen Victoria. Maybe a pearl necklace that had been her mother's gift. Certainly items that held deep sentimental value, irreplaceable not for their diamonds and gold, but for the love and memories they represented. One can imagine that vanished case containing a beloved pearl necklace, its lustrous strands now scattered across the ocean floor. Perhaps a diamond brooch given to Louise by her father, its sparkle forever dimmed by salt water. Maybe earrings she had worn on her wedding day, now resting in the eternal darkness of the deep. These weren't just jewels, they were tangible connections to the people she loved, physical embodiments of the happiest moments of her life. And now, they lay somewhere beneath the Moroccan surf, a sunken time capsule of Edwardian glamour that would never again catch the light. The price of survival. The royal family's survival came at a terrible cost that extended far beyond lost jewels. The exposure and trauma of the shipwreck had devastating consequences, particularly for the Duke of Fife. Though he initially seemed to recover, the ordeal had gravely compromised his health. The family continued their journey to Egypt, hoping the warm climate would aid his recovery. But the illness that began with their night in the storm proved too severe. The Duke contracted pleurisy, and despite medical care in Cairo and Aswan, his condition deteriorated rapidly. On January 29, 1912, just over a month after the shipwreck, Alexander Duff, 1st Duke of Fife, died in Aswan, Egypt. His death was officially ascribed to ill health caused during the wreck. The disaster's impact had extended far beyond material loss, becoming the direct cause of a senior royal family member's death. For Princess Louise, the loss was devastating. She had survived the shipwreck, but lost both her treasured jewels and, far more tragically, her beloved husband. The woman who had once dazzled at royal balls now faced a future of mourning and solitude. Following her husband's death, Louise withdrew from public life, choosing a path of reclusion that echoed her grandmother Queen Victoria's response to Prince Albert's death. She spent nearly 2 decades living quietly at Mar Lodge, her Scottish home, emerging only rarely for family occasions. the treasures that survived. Yet not all was lost. The jewels that remained tell their own story of resilience and continuity. The magnificent Fife Tiara, that breathtaking wedding gift from her husband, had not been in the fatal jewel case. This masterpiece, with its nearly 200 carats of diamonds and distinctive pear-shaped drops that trembled with movement, survived to grace future generations. Princess Louise's daughter, Princess Alexandra, wore the Fife Tiara at the coronations of both King George VI and Queen Elizabeth II, creating a bridge between the tragedy of 1911 and the triumphs that followed. The tiara continued to appear at family weddings, worn by subsequent generations who understood they were carrying forward a legacy that had nearly been lost to the sea. In a final act of preservation, the Fife Tiara was accepted by the British government in 2017 in lieu of inheritance tax, valued at £1.4 million. Today, this magnificent piece, every glittering diamond a silent witness to what was almost lost, is on display at Kensington Palace, where visitors can admire it and remember the princess who fought so desperately to save her treasures. The survival of pieces like the Fife Tiara serves as a poignant counterpoint to what was lost. They remind us that while some heirlooms can transcend personal ownership to become enduring symbols of history, others, perhaps the most personally meaningful ones, can vanish in an instant, leaving only stories and memories behind. A legacy written in water. More than a century later, Princess Louise's lost jewels remain somewhere beneath the waters off Cape Spartel, their diamonds and pearls now part of the eternal mystery of the deep. The shifting sands and strong currents that claimed them have kept their secret well. No diver or beachcomber has ever reported finding royal jewelry on that treacherous coast. But perhaps that's fitting. These jewels, born of love and celebration, lost in a moment of desperate protection, have become something more than mere objects. They've become symbols of the fragility of material possessions, the power of love to drive us to impossible choices, and the cruel irony that sometimes our greatest efforts to protect what we cherish most lead to its destruction. Princess Louise's story reminds us that behind every glittering tiara and sparkling necklace lies a human story of love, loss, hope, and heartbreak. Her jewels weren't just accessories, they were physical manifestations of relationships, celebrations, and dreams. When they vanished beneath the waves, they took with them not just monetary value, but irreplaceable connections to the people and moments that had defined her life. The enduring questions. Today, as we marvel at the surviving pieces of royal jewellery in museums and at state occasions, we might pause to remember those that didn't survive. What stories would Princess Louise's lost jewels tell if they could speak? What moments of joy had they witnessed? What tears of happiness had they caught the light of? Her tragedy teaches us something profound about the nature of treasure itself. The jewels she lost were valuable not just for their diamonds and gold, but for the love they represented, the memories they held, the connections they embodied. In trying to save them, she was trying to save pieces of her heart. And perhaps, in the end, that's exactly what she did. For while the physical jewels lie lost beneath the sea, the story of her love for them, her desperate attempt to protect them, and the sacrifice that attempt required has become immortal. The princess who lost her jewels to the sea has given us something far more precious. A reminder that the greatest treasures are not always the ones we can hold in our hands, but the ones we carry in our hearts. The waves that claimed Princess Louise's jewels over a century ago continue to wash the shores of Cape Spartel. And somewhere beneath those restless waters, diamonds still sparkle in the eternal darkness, waiting for a dawn that will never come, silent witnesses to a love so deep that it chose to risk everything rather than let go. What treasures in your own life would you fight to protect? What memories do your most precious possessions hold? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories of royal history and the human hearts behind the crowns.